There is a very specific shade of gray that covers the San Fernando Valley on a Tuesday morning in late November. It is a suffocating, dense canopy of smog and shattered dreams, settling heavily over Van Nuys like a dusty wool blanket. I used to stare at that sky while sitting in gridlock traffic on the 405 freeway, watching my life tick away one idle engine revolution at a time, the city of angels, the promised land of sunshine and stardom. What a magnificent illusion it all turned out to be. They tell you that Los Angeles is the place where dreams come true, but they leave out the part where those dreams come with a bill that you will spend the rest of your natural life trying to pay off. The truth is, people my age are fleeing Los Angeles in droves, packing up whatever is left of our sanity and our savings and running for the hills, or in my case, running for the other side of the planet. We are the invisible exodus, the retirees who played by all the rules, worked for decades, and woke up to find that the city we built no longer has any room for us. My name is Sandra Kowalski. I am 64 years old now, though I made my great escape when I was 61. For 30 grueling and soul-crushing years, I worked as a medical billing specialist at Cedars Sinai Hospital. 30 years of deciphering insurance codes, arguing with claims adjusters, and watching patients cry over bills they could never hope to pay. I spent 3 decades of my life navigating the labyrinthine corridors of the American healthcare system, all while trying to keep my own financial head above water in one of the most punishingly expensive cities on earth. I lived in Van Nuys in a cramped, poorly ventilated apartment that smelled faintly of mildew and desperation. Every morning, I would wake up before the sun, brew a pot of cheap coffee, and begin the grueling commute to the hospital. 30 years of loyalty, 30 years of service. And what did I have to show for it when the dust finally settled? A meager Social Security check of $980 a month. Let that sink in for a moment. $980 a month. In Los Angeles, that might cover a few weeks of groceries and a couple of fill-ups at the gas station if you are lucky. The cost of a living crisis in Southern California is not just a talking point on the evening news. It is a daily suffocating reality that slowly strangles the life out of you. The absurdity of Los Angeles prices had reached a point where it felt like I was being financially waterboarded. Let us talk about rent. My landlord, a faceless corporation that bought the building a decade ago, raised my rent every single year like clockwork. I was paying thousands of dollars for a box in the valley where the air conditioning barely worked and the plumbing groaned every time I turned on the faucet. Then there was the gas, constantly hovering at exorbitant prices, draining my wallet just so I could have the privilege of sitting in traffic for 2 hours a day. But the final straw, the absolute anchor object of my despair, was a simple rectangular piece of plastic, my residential parking permit. Because parking in my neighborhood was a nightmare of street cleaning rules and nonstop ticketing, I had to pay for a dedicated spot, $240 a month. $240 a month just for the right to leave my 10-year-old sedan on a slab of cracked concrete. When I held that parking permit in my hand and realized how many hours of my life I had traded just to park my car, something inside me broke. It was a profound, irreversible fracture. The city that had promised the dream was delivering nothing but a relentless, unforgiving bill. The insurance alone was astronomical. I was paying hundreds of dollars just to legally drive a vehicle I could barely afford to maintain. I knew I had to get out, but where could I go? Florida? Texas? Arizona? The prices there were rising just as fast, driven up by all the other displaced Californians looking for a lifeline. That was when I stumbled upon a different kind of escape. I started watching videos, reading articles, disappearing down rabbit holes late at night, when the anxiety of my impending poverty kept me awake. I discovered a community of expatriates, a people just like me, who had taken a much larger leap. I discovered Vietnam. It sounded crazy at first. Vietnam? What did I know about Vietnam? I knew what everyone from my generation knew, which was heavily colored by history and movies. But the more I read, the more I realized that modern Vietnam was nothing like the images of the past. It was a rapidly developing, vibrant, and incredibly welcoming country. The turning point for me was reading a book that completely shattered my preconceived notions about retirement. The book is called You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker. If you want to understand the psychological shift required to leave everything behind, the link is in the comments. Reading that book felt like someone was finally speaking directly to my soul. Walker wrote about the arbitrary geographical borders we confine ourselves to, simply because we were born within them. As Alan Walker eloquently puts it in You Were Never Meant to Stay, we anchor our identities to zip codes that no longer serve our well-being, trading our precious twilight years for the familiar comfort of our own suffering. That line hit me like a physical blow. I was trading my twilight years for the familiar comfort of my own suffering in Van Nuys. I decided right then and there I was going to move to Da Nang, Vietnam. When I broke the news to my family, the reaction was exactly what you would expect. I am divorced, and my 2 grown children are my entire world. My daughter Melissa lives in Burbank, struggling with her own mountain of Los Angeles debt, working 2 jobs just to afford a tiny studio. My son Tyler lives in San Diego, caught in the exact same relentless California grind. When I sat them down at a quiet coffee shop in Studio City and told them I was moving halfway across the world, Melissa burst into tears. She thought I was having a mental breakdown. Tyler was more practical, peppering me with questions about healthcare, safety, and visas. They could not understand why I would leave the country, but I laid it out for them. I showed them the math. I showed them my $980 a month income. I showed them that staying in Los Angeles meant I would eventually become a burden to them, forcing them to care for me in a city that was already bleeding them dry. Moving to Vietnam was not just an act of self-preservation, it was an act of love for my children, freeing them from the impending financial catastrophe of my retirement. The day I arrived in Da Nang is permanently burned into my memory. After more than 20 hours of travel, stepping out of the airport was like walking into a warm, humid embrace. The air smelled of salt water, jasmine, and distant wood smoke. It was a sensory overload in the best possible way. Da Nang is a coastal city in central Vietnam, and it is nothing short of a miracle. It is modern, impeccably clean, and framed by lush green mountains on one side and the endless sparkling blue waters of the South China Sea on the other. I took a taxi to my rented apartment, a sprawling, light-filled one-bedroom place with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. When I woke up that first morning and looked out at the sunrise reflecting off the water, a profound sense of peace washed over me. And then came the moment that truly solidified my decision. The key emotional moment that I will never forget. I sat down at my small dining table with a cup of robust, chocolatey Vietnamese coffee, and I calculated my expenses. My rent for this beautiful ocean view apartment was a fraction of what I paid in Van Nuys. My utilities were negligible. My food costs, eating fresh, incredible meals every single day, were minuscule. I looked at the grand total and I burst into tears of pure relief. The morning I realized my entire monthly expenses in Da Nang cost less than my Los Angeles car insurance alone, I knew I was finally free. The financial breakdown is staggering, almost comical when you compare it to Southern California. In Los Angeles, $980 meant starvation and homelessness. In Da Nang, $980 affords me a lifestyle I could only dream of during my 30 years at Cedars Sinai. I eat out almost every day. I buy fresh produce from the local markets. I take taxis wherever I need to go. I even have a house cleaner who comes twice a week. All of this entirely covered by my meager Social Security check, with money left over to put into savings. The anxiety that used to sit in my chest like a lead weight, the constant grinding fear of unexpected bills, simply vanished. But it is not just about the money. It is about the quality of life, specifically as a solo, older woman. One of Tyler's biggest concerns was my safety. The perception of safety in the West is completely skewed. In Los Angeles, I would constantly look over my shoulder when walking to my car at night. I kept pepper spray on my keychain. I avoided certain neighborhoods entirely. Da Nang is the safest place I have ever lived. I can walk along the beach promenade at midnight by myself and feel completely secure. The local people are incredibly respectful, kind, and deeply community-oriented. There is a reverence for elders here that has been entirely lost in American society. I am not treated like a nuisance or an invisible ghost. I am treated with warmth and dignity. The health care, another major concern given my background, is phenomenal. Having worked in medical billing, I know exactly how broken the American system is. Here in Da Nang, there are state-of-the-art international hospitals. A consultation with an English-speaking specialist costs less than the copay I use to charge patients in Los Angeles. The facilities are spotless, the care is attentive, and there are no labyrinthine billing codes designed to bankrupt you. It is healthcare the way it was meant to be, focused on healing rather than profit. Finding a community was surprisingly easy. Da Nang has a thriving, diverse population of expatriates from all over the world. There are retiree groups, book clubs, yoga classes on the beach, and language exchanges. I have made friends from Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, and yes, even a few fellow escapees from California. We gather for dinners, share our stories of the lives we left behind, and marvel at the incredible fortune of finding this paradise. But I also made a concerted effort to connect with the local community. I take Vietnamese language classes, which is an incredibly difficult but rewarding endeavor. The local vendors at the market know my name. They smile when I approach, and they patiently help me stumble through my pronunciation of their beautiful language. Of course, it is not always perfect. Relocating your entire existence to a foreign country comes with significant difficulties. The language barrier is the most obvious challenge. Tones matter in Vietnamese, and saying a word with the wrong inflection can completely change its meaning. There are days when I feel utterly exhausted by the simple act of trying to communicate. Then there is the cultural adjustment. The driving here is a chaotic, flowing river of motorbikes that requires you to completely abandon your Western rigid adherence to traffic lanes. It took me weeks to learn how to cross the street without having a panic attack. But the hardest part, the only true pain I carry with me, is the distance from my children. Being 14 time zones away from Melissa and Tyler is a heavy burden. I miss their birthdays. I miss random Sunday brunches. I miss the physical presence of the people I love most. We rely on video calls, navigating the tricky time difference, trying to maintain our bond through glowing screens. It is a sacrifice, a profound one, but I always return to the realization that my absence is a gift of financial freedom for them. Last year they finally came to visit. Melissa and Tyler saved up their vacation time and flew into Da Nang for 2 weeks. It was the most magical fortnight of my life. I showed them my world. I took them to my favorite noodle stall, where the rich, complex broth costs barely anything. We walked through the ancient town of Hoi An, glowing with silk lanterns. We swam in the warm ocean and drank fresh coconut water on the sand. As we sat on my balcony one evening, watching the city lights reflect on the water, Melissa leaned her head on my shoulder. She looked at me, truly looked at me, and said she had never seen me look so relaxed, so genuinely happy. Tyler admitted that he finally understood. They saw that I had not run away from them. I had run toward a life that actually allowed me to live. As Alan Walker wisely notes in You Were Never Meant to Stay, the greatest tragedy of the modern age is that we have equated survival with success, forgetting that a life constantly lived on the precipice of ruin is no life at all. I spent 30 years surviving in Los Angeles. I spent 30 years paying for a parking permit, fighting traffic and drowning in a sea of medical bills. I gave that city my youth, my energy, and my labor, and it gave me a $980 check and a gentle push toward the abyss. I chose not to fall. I chose to pack my bags, cross the ocean, and rewrite the final chapters of my story. Da Nang gave me my dignity back. It gave me safety, community, and the profound realization that life does not have to be a constant grinding struggle. I look out at the South China Sea now, and I do not miss the 405 freeway. I do not miss the smog, or the rent hikes, or the soul-crushing cost of merely existing. I escaped the city that promised the dream and delivered the bill, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, I am never coming back. The contrast between my past and my present is something I contemplate every single day as I walk the pristine shores of the Mai Kay beach. In Los Angeles, the relentless pursuit of financial stability was a treadmill that constantly increased its speed, daring you to stumble. If you missed a step, if you had one unexpected medical emergency, one car breakdown, one rent increase, you were thrown off entirely. The anxiety was a physical entity, a tight band across my chest that never loosened. I remember the smell of exhaust fumes creeping into my apartment on hot August afternoons, the sound of sirens wailing down Victory Boulevard, the palpable tension of millions of people all trying to claw their way to the top of a shrinking pyramid. Here in Vietnam, the rhythm of life is fundamentally different. There is a gentleness to the daily routine that took me months to fully embrace. At first I found myself rushing, anticipating stress that never arrived. I would brace myself for a massive bill at the grocery store, only to be handed back a handful of colorful currency and change. I would prepare for an argument at the visa office, only to be met with a smile and a helpful clerk. The defensive armor I had built up over 30 years in Southern California slowly began to crack and fall away. I think about the patients I used to bill at Cedars-Sinai, good, honest, hard-working people whose lives were decimated by illness. I spent my days entering codes that translated to financial ruin for families already facing their darkest hours. It was a morally exhausting job, participating in a system that valued margins over humanity. Living in Da Nang, experiencing a healthcare system that provides excellent care without the predatory pricing, has been incredibly healing for my soul. It vindicates the lingering guilt I felt for all those years. My children, Melissa and Tyler, are my constant connection back to the world I left. Melissa tells me about her struggles in Burbank, the rent that eats up more than half her income, the side hustles she takes on just to afford a weekend trip. Tyler describes the endless sprawl of San Diego, the traffic that rivals Los Angeles, the housing market that remains permanently out of his reach. I listen to their frustrations and my heart aches for them. I want to tell them to leave, to follow my path, to break the chains that keep them tethered to a failing system. But I also know that they are young. They have careers. They have their own journeys to navigate. My escape was the privilege of my age, a desperate leap taken when I had nothing left to lose. Sometimes, as the sun sets over the Suntraw Peninsula, casting brilliant hues of orange and purple across the sky, I think about that $240 parking permit. I keep it in a small drawer in my apartment, right next to my passport. It is a talisman, a reminder of the absurdity I left behind. When I feel a pang of homesickness, when I miss the specific taste of an in-and-out burger or the familiarity of English language street signs, I take out that piece of plastic. I look at it. I remember the cost, and the homesickness instantly evaporates. The escape from Los Angeles was not just a geographic relocation. It